friends, and welcome back to Sewing for Cosplay. This is the fourth and final episode for the Punk Captain Marvel vest. Woo! So in this episode, I'm going to show you how to put the lining in the vest, or more correctly, how I put the lining in my vest. And I want to make a recommendation that you put all of your detailing, all of the rivets and such, not the star was a magnet, but any of the rivets and such onto your vest before you put the lining on. I did not. Big mistake. And it totally messed up the lining. So I would recommend putting any rivets and details like that onto your vest and then putting the lining into your vest. So anyway, without further ado, let's get to the tutorial. Now it's time to do the lining for your vest. Now, I did create a pattern when I made my vest pattern, but I made a lot of alterations to my vest, so I ended up going ahead and just draping a new pattern for my vest. If you didn't make a whole lot of alterations, you probably can go ahead and just use that vest pattern you made. But if you did, or if you want to go ahead and practice draping a pattern, you can do this as well. So to drape it, I went ahead and draped my lining pattern over top of the vest that I have on my dress form. You want to make sure the grain line's kind of going along with your vest. As you can see in the picture, make sure that you have enough fabric to cover all of your seam allowances. And then you're going to pin it so that it's not too tight but not too loose. Oh, my cat's being so dramatic here. I'm sorry. Hi, kitty. And after it's draped and pinned, then you're going to trace over all of your vest outer lines in chalk. So the shoulder seam, the armhole edges, the neckline, and the front, the bottom. And you will have to also add a seam allowance at your shoulder seam and your side seam. You don't have to add a seam allowance at your armhole or your neck or front or bottom, because we haven't done anything with the original seam allowances that are there. You will also need to repeat this on the back. Now for the back, you don't need to do the entire back piece as a giant piece. You can just fold your fabric in half, line up the fold at the center of your back piece, and then pin it in place, and then you can trace it, and then when you cut it out, when you open it up, you'll have the full back piece. So yeah, you're going to go ahead and do that. Remember to keep the same seam allowance that you used for the rest of your vest, whatever that happened to be. Add that to the appropriate places wherever you have already used up your seam allowance in your garment, and go ahead and cut that out. You're also going to want to decide which side of your lining you're going to want to be the outside fabric and what side's going to be the inside, touching the inner part of your vest. Once you decide that, you're going to put the inside fabrics together and go ahead and sew your lining together at the shoulder seams like you would basically any type of garment. Yeah, go ahead and sew it together front to back at both shoulder seams. And after you've sewn it together at the shoulder seams, you're going to go ahead and press that seam. Now, lining fabric is usually a plastic fabric. So you're going to want to check on some scrap fabric what heat setting to use for your lining fabric, because it will melt. Or you can alternatively use a press cloth. In fact, that's probably not a bad idea. So kind of practice on some scrap fabric, scrap lining fabric, to see the best way to get those seams pressed cleanly, using which heat setting and which press cloth in order to get those pressed so that you don't melt your fabric. I seem to have missed where I sewed my side seams of my lining together. Either I didn't record it or I didn't upload it and accidentally deleted the video. Not really sure what happened, but after sewing the shoulder seams together, I would then sew the side seams together, go ahead and press that, and then after that, I sew the lining to the vest along the front opening. I think that's how I did it. I'm really not sure. It's been a while since I've done it. That's how I would recommend doing it if I didn't do it that way. So yeah, that would be the easiest. Just sew the entire lining together and then sew it to the vest along that front opening edge, with the outer fabrics facing each other. And then you can pin that. Because as long as you pin within the seam allowance, it doesn't matter if it's poking through the vinyl. And I believe, like I said, I believe that's how I did it, and I just missed the video of me sewing the side seams. Alternatively, I might have sewn the front edge, and then after sewing the front edge, went back and sewed the side seams, which seems like that would have been a lot of extra work, and I'm not really sure why I would have done it that way, but sometimes I'm not really thinking when I'm sewing and I do things wacky, and definitely don't recommend that. So, yeah. After you've sewn the front lining or the front opening edge, you're then going to trim and any excess fabric. Like I had excess lining fabric because I think I added a seam allowance to that lining, the front edge, which I shouldn't have. But anyway, trim any excess fabric that you have, and then go ahead and press that seam open to kind of help you when you turn it later. Which you will do when you need to do the next part, which is the armhole. Now the armhole was a big pain in the butt. What I should have done was just sewn the armhole together with the raw edges together and then done a bias edge, but I didn't. Instead, I folded the edges under and did a top stitch around it, and it was a big pain in the butt, and it took me a long time to do it, and it was very finicky, and actually not on video was me going back and fixing it multiple times because it just did not look good. I ended up having to put some interfacing in it just to keep all of the edges from popping out, and it was not fun. I would definitely recommend doing a bias edging along a raw edge. I think that would have made it so much simpler, but yeah, you'll definitely want to attach your armhole and do that very, very carefully, and it's not fun. I'm so sorry. The rest of this is all sewing across the bottom. So because everything's sewn together, you can't just sew it and flip it. You're gonna have to fold everything under and pin it. And here I am with those big clunky clothespins again because I didn't have wonder clips at the time. So yeah, you'll want to fold everything under and pin or clip it. And then you're going to top stitch across the bottom because it's multiple colors. Actually, blue was the primary color, thankfully. And then there was just a couple of spots that had red. So I was able to go through and do one big long strip of blue and then come back and hit it with some red. But it took a long time to clip everything in place, and then it took a long time to sew because I had to go really, really slow and make sure that I got the lining and the vinyl and that everything was in and that nothing was going to be popping loose later, because I didn't want to have to redo it because then it was going to be poking more holes in that vinyl, and I didn't want it to look unprofessional. So this definitely took me the longest. It's going to be a big old montage for you. But yeah, enjoy the next, 30 seconds of me pitting or clipping and sewing the bottom edge of this lining to my vest. And I hope this helped, and I hope your project that you use this to make turns out wonderful. And if you do use this video to make something, I would love to see what you make. Please send me a picture or tag me in your picture. I love seeing I love seeing things that people use my tutorials to make. I've only had a couple because like I'm a very, very small time cosplayer, so people don't really know of my tutorials, and they don't use my tutorials, and I don't know how good they are, but I try. I try to help people out. So yeah, if you use my tutorials, please send me your finished products or tag me in them on whatever social media you use. I would absolutely love to see what you used my tutorial for, and I would love to see your finished product. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I will leave you to my fast-forwarded sewing.